All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Forward Physio. Today, I am lucky to be here with Geoff Ford, who's an Australian physio, an expert in all things ACL, and an expert in throwing kettlebells around. Jeff, how's it going?
Very well, thank you, Noah, and thanks for the intro, mate. I do love to throw around a few kettlebells in my spare time, and yeah, I'm absolutely honoured to be on your potty, mate. We were saying before this, and we've had a couple of cracks at recording this already this morning, but it's funny that we've sort of known each other via social media for a couple of years, but never actually spoken before. But you still already feel like you know each other through seeing each other video content, etc. But it's nice to actually chat today.
Yeah, it is. And the video content that Jeff may be speaking of, at least for why I feel like I know Jeff personally, is because of a lot of the content that you post on social media. And you've been doing that you've been going strong for a while now. And a lot of the content, I would say we have fairly similar styles of, debunking harmful, misinformative videos that become really, really viral and just trying to be evidence-based clinicians and overall being pretty optimistic as well. And as the other thing is you also have a podcast just like me.
Yeah, we've got a few similarities there, mate.
Yeah.
But definitely that those sort of myth busting videos, which I think are great, and I love seeing other people doing them because healthcare should be beneficial to people. It shouldn't be leaving people with burdens and rules and things that they've got to abide by when those particular rules and things are actually not necessarily based on good evidence. So I think that style of video is so important, especially in this day and age where what we tend to see going viral is some of those non-evidence based videos, which can actually cause harm.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jeff, do you mind giving people a background into just you in general and what you do both professionally and for fun?
Absolutely, no, I would love to, mate. So professionally, I am a physiotherapist based on the Sunshine Coast, which is a nice beach town in Queensland, Australia. A lovely warm spot to live. Get to surf several times a week. So I absolutely love where I get to live. I've been a physio now for, let me see, when did I graduate? 2016, 8 years, I think it is. I actually went to physio a bit later. So left school, had no real idea what I wanted to do, and then ended up finishing a law and business degree, started working as a lawyer,
Oh, wow.
but not because I I necessarily wanted to be a lawyer. It was one of those things I just had no idea what to do. And a few people said, "Hey, law's a good thing. It gives you lots of options." So fell into a role in a big law firm, but was pretty miserable. I think it just didn't align with my values. So spent a long time, not regretting that decision, but a bit unhappy with what I was doing. Took some time out, traveled the world, did a couple of snow seasons, did a bunch of really random jobs from cleaning toilets to catching and relocating wildlife,
Whoa.
and eventually came back and did some psychological testing to try and help me figure out what I was going to be well aligned with, and ended up going back to uni in my early 30s, showing my age, and did physio. So it's been quite the journey, but I do feel thankful that I did find what I was passionate about and something that really aligned well with my values. I love working with people. I love trying to help people and to inform people and empower people and help guide them along their health journeys. I think it's such a wonderful thing that we get to do that with people. So I feel very privileged to be where I am today.
That's incredible. I'm glad that you found your path. Yeah. Wow.
Very, very, very lucky to do what we do. I think it's a
Hmm.
great career.
And now what you do is you run your own practice. Is it out of your home or is this space that you're in right now, is it just a different property?
Yeah, it's a different property. So just this open style little, I can do you a little tour for those watching the video.
Nice gym.
Thanks, mate. It's a nice little open style. I got a little room out the back there, which is more of a chatty assessment sort of treatment room. But yeah, it's a wonderful little space. I'm just about 2 minutes walk from the beach here, so it's a great little spot here. But it's not attached to home, but it's a separate little space. So yeah, it's a really lovely place to work though. Lots of natural light coming in through the window, and a few good little coffee shops around here. So
Beautiful.
it's a very nice spot.
What a life. Cool. So, Geoff, the reason that I asked you to come on today is because we wanted to talk about the cross bracing protocol. And this isn't going to be a podcast that's a deep dive into ACL healing and what the cross bracing protocol is, because I've already spoken to Dr. Steph Filbe, who is the lead author of the first and only, to my knowledge, cross bracing protocol paper that's currently out. And I believe you have spoken to Dr. Tom Cross himself on your podcast, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I think if people don't know what the cross bracing protocol is, I would point them to either one of those podcasts so they could get a sort of background lesson. But if you are very keen to hear Geoff speak and you don't want to listen to another podcast before that, Geoff, could you give like a Spark Notes version of what the cross bracing protocol is?
Yeah, sure. So the cross bracing protocol is a bracing protocol that is designed to facilitate healing of your ACL. So we previously used to believe that ACLs can't heal for a variety of reasons, but we have since realized that they can, and that has been around for quite a while, to be honest. So there was actually some Japanese studies going back several decades ago that showed that ACLs could potentially heal. And we also know from the Canoon trial, sorry, that they can heal even without bracing. But bracing via the cross bracing protocol seems to facilitate an increased rate of healing, and also the quality of heal seems to be better. So the cross bracing protocol itself it's 12-week. The full protocol is 12 weeks. You've got 4 weeks at 90 degrees. We can run through the details of this, but it's 4 weeks at 90 degrees braced and not moving. And then you gradually open that brace up over time. And the results of the bracing protocol are pretty incredible. So for those that are good candidates who go into the protocol, it seems to be over a 90% heal rate.
Yeah, and which is incredible. I'm very excited to hear and read, more on this protocol as more and more research comes out. Uh, you have actually conducted it a few times now, and you get patients from Dr. Tom Cross. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right, Noah. So I don't know the exact number now, but there's been quite a few who I've taken through the full protocol. I've also spoken to quite a few people who have come to me for advice on what they should do with their ACL. They've ended up going into the protocol, but have largely done it via other physios. So I've been very fortunate to be involved in quite a few now, and it's such an exciting thing to be involved in, because the excitement and the joy that people receive when they initially feel like surgery is the only option, then they find out there's another possible route to take, and then actually getting to the end of that, and more often than not, they have a great result, and it really gives people a great sense of relief and excitement as well. So yeah, it's been wonderful. And at the moment, I'm only working via Tom Cross, because to run the protocol, you have to have a sports physician or a doctor on board who can prescribe medication and oversee the process. And at the moment, there aren't many people locally here anyway who are willing to jump on board with that protocol. So at the moment, it's been run through Tom Cross, who's down in Sydney, and I'm up on the Sunshine Coast, so a good sort of day's drive away from there. But it works out remotely quite well.
Oh, so you mostly are doing this remotely?
Absolutely.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow.
Sorry, in terms of, so I'm seeing patients in here, but they're consulting with Tom Cross remotely.
I see. Okay. So when it comes to the patients and Tom Cross, are they making the drive or the flight to Sydney to go and see him, or are they also consulting with Tom Cross remotely?
Uh, a bit of both, actually. So largely remotely via Zoom, etc. But then sometimes they are actually going down. So for the at the 12-week mark, or whenever they finish the protocol, they will get a follow-up MRI, and he will then give them the opportunity to go in and have a consult with him, and he can sort of go through and test the knee out and look at the MRI with them. So they often choose to go down there for that because it's a short flight from where we are down there, and it's quite an exciting time, a nerve-wracking time for people. It's kind of all on the line, so
Yeah.
they like to go in and have that appointment in person if possible.
Wow. Okay. Well, we're going to get to sort of that 12-week mark in a little bit and sort of talk about patients' experiences and their successes and perhaps their failures with the protocol. But before that, we have to start at week 0. And we're basically just going to have a practical session on the cross bracing protocol and what it typically looks like when you're working with patients, key things to keep in mind at different stages. And hopefully, this is just a very, very good resource for any clinician or patient that's listening to this so they could have a very good understanding of what the training and the process looks like when you are in that brace. So, week 0 is the
Yeah.
first, when they're first in the brace, right? Now, what is the longest someone has seen you after originally injuring their ACL? Or I
I
guess what's an
think it's close.
average?
Yeah, it's probably close to 3 weeks. Anything after 3 weeks is pretty much a contraindication, I think, because basically the two ends of the ACL will involute, or they won't. They'll basically heal. The surface of each one will heal over, so they can't actually heal to each other again. Um, on average, though, I mean, the best time to go into the brace is around that sort of day 5 to 7, so that 1 week mark.
Mm,
But probably on average between 1 and 2 weeks, often push towards the 2 weeks because more of sort of historical and systemic factors that have led to most people not finding out about it straight away. So often people are, uh, you know, it takes them often a little while to get an initial MRI. Once they get the MRI, they're off to the doctor. The doctor sends them straight to the surgeon, and typically they'll have a surgical review. And sometimes in there, that's when a person will jump online, usually, and start to do some research and actually go, "Oh, hang on, there's some other options here," and that's potentially where they sort of come across Tom Cross and or me. Um, and occasionally it'll be sent via, say, a physiotherapist, etc. But a lot of the time people are not finding out about this soon enough. And I've definitely had quite a few people who have gone to see Dr. Cross based off their original MRI, being told they're a good candidate for this bracing protocol, which is not everyone. And then but Tom's then has said, but you just need to get a follow-up MRI because you're now at the 2 week or 3 week mark. And then they've had another MRI and found out that unfortunately they're no longer a good candidate because the two ends of the ACL have involuted and therefore won't heal together again. So that can be pretty devastating for people.
yeah, definitely. Someone I was just referred someone from Stephanie Philbay who they tore their ACL 10 years ago. And it's we had to sort of explain that it's really, really unlikely that the cross bracing protocol would heal the ACL. You're not in a state of healing at that point, 10 years post. Um, so yeah, hopefully this
Absolutely not.
becomes much, much more widespread knowledge so that people know that this is available so early on. In Canada, I think it's going to be a challenge because it takes 3 months to get an MRI. Where you are people getting
Wow.
MRI? Yeah, it takes a very long time. So people are able to get an MRI where you're at within a week's time.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep. Usually they can get in pretty quickly. Yeah.
that's good. I'm gonna have to go to Australia.
Can,
Okay.
can they not go privately to get an MRI?
A lot of the time when people want to go private, I'm in Toronto, which is
Yeah.
about a 2-hour drive from Buffalo, New York. And people will often, if they want to go private, they'll go to the States and pay out of pocket. It's expensive.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I
I
didn't
am,
realize that. That's a real barrier.
it is. And I'm wondering about the financial barrier for the people that you work with. Are they, are they paying out of pocket? I mean, I know they are to get on the flight to Sydney, but
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a good question. From the top of my head, I think some people you can potentially get a subsidized one or even a bulk build one, but it's definitely some people are paying out of pocket. I'd say more are paying out of pocket than aren't. And it's, it's a few $100s potentially. So yeah, absolutely. That could be a barrier, but they inevitably will need that one way or the other, really.
Yeah.
I mean, arguably, you could go down the conservative route and just, and there obviously are plenty of people in the community who have torn their ACL who don't even ever know about it, and they potentially get back to the activities. But I think by and large, we are better off knowing about an ACL rupture than not knowing about it.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. So you have someone who has a confirmed ACL tear. They got their MRI. Their ACL is in a state where it could heal, and they're a good candidate for the cross bracing protocol. And they decide to do it. Do they come to you to get the brace and you sort of hook it up for them? Are you the one who applies it day one?
Definitely can be, but people do also self apply the brace as well. And often when they come in to see me, I'll just be checking that it's fitted properly,
Hmm.
because it's important that it's in the right position on your knee, and so that we can hold that knee in plenty of flexion. But yeah, I definitely do fit the brace quite a bit of time as well.
And you're looking for 90 degrees of flexion.
Yes, for the full bracing protocol. So there are different options, and those options will be dictated by individual factors. So the extent of the injury. So if you've got a big MCL, so medial collateral ligament tear, then you may well not be fixing your knee at 90, because it's theorized that it will then lead to too much knee stiffness. So then your knee might be braced from, say, 90 to 30 degrees.
Mm,
But yeah, usually for the full bracing protocol, you are fixed at 90 degrees.
okay. What under what circumstances are people going to be doing that full bracing protocol?
Um, a lot of personal circumstances, to be honest. So if you have got adequate social support and means to still earn money, so on the flip side, if your job, if potentially if you're a casual worker, you don't have employment, you don't have any sick leave, and your job requires you to be up and moving around, then it's very difficult for you to be braced at 90 degrees. Or if you're at home, you don't have any support, or if you're a single parent or something like that, then it can be potentially a barrier to then be at 90 degrees, because you can't walk around like that.
Right. Wow. So if you look at the protocol in that Stephanie Filbay paper, you'll see week to week the different stages. And it says for the first 4 weeks, people are locked at 90 degrees and there's no wiggle room at all. So that's the full bracing protocol. But you're seeing people where they sort of bypass that first step and they immediately are able to walk around a little bit if they, have about 30 degrees or so of flexion.
Yep.
Okay. So are you telling those people that maybe they're less likely to get ACL healing? Do we have that knowledge yet?
I don't think we've got that knowledge that yet, sorry. But I mean, I will let them know that the most of the research, or the research, especially in that paper that you're referring to, who Steph Filbay was the lead author, um, most of those people were, I think, if not all of them, were doing the full protocol. So we know there's reasonably good evidence coming out around the full protocol. We don't have as much evidence around the other variations of the protocol. So I think it's good to always be fully open and honest with people. So I definitely let them know there is the potential that it won't be as successful, um, because the full bracing protocol is based off those principles of reduction and fixation. So reduction is bringing the two ends of the ACL together, and fixation is reducing movement, which is what we tend to do for bony injuries like fractures. And that's what the cross bracing protocol is based upon. So it's theorized that leads to the best outcomes. But we don't have enough evidence, and I think that's going to be one of the really exciting new areas in the future, that when we get more evidence around what the actual requirements are to lead to a good heal
Yeah.
for the right person.
Well, wouldn't it be wonderful if people could start off moving their knee instead of having to be fixated for 4 weeks in this one position? If you could just imagine that for a second, getting around day to day, like doing all of your chores, it would be so hard just to get around with your knee stuck like that.
100%. Yeah, it's a real challenge, and that's one of the first things that I will sort of talk to people about, because I think if you go into it with reasonable expectations, at least you're going into it with eyes open.
Hmm.
Whereas if you go into it thinking, oh, I just got to have it braced and I can take it out when I sleep and I can take it off when I feel uncomfortable, then I think you're going to find that 4 weeks, especially the beginning of it, really challenging, because it's not easy. It's definitely not easy.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't imagine that it would be. So you sort of compared this to a broken bone, and I think there's a big difference here. And it's not just the fact that one's a ligament and one's a bone. Um, the difference being that with a broken bone, we're typically not doing many exercises with the muscles that surround the fracture, right? Those are immobilized completely.
Hmm.
Um, with the cross bracing protocol, exercises are encouraged even when the knee can't be moving through a range of motion, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
So
can
that's
you walk
a
us
fundamental
through?
part of.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Noah. That's an absolutely fundamental part. So I think there's probably a couple of rationales for the exercises. One is to maintain, and if not, try and improve your strength, muscle bulk, etc. Just also promoting whole system health as well. So we know that things heal when they are healthy. So exercise is a fundamental part of maintaining a healthy system, healthy body. So I
Hmm.
think I always try and talk about exercise from those perspectives. And then increasingly as the heel of the ACL progresses, it goes into what we call the remodeling phase. And so when that's happening, we actually need mechanical stimulation of that ACL tissue to ensure that when it heals into a nice taut ACL.
Hmm. Very cool. So can you walk us through what some of the exercises will look like for someone who is doing the full protocol and for those first 4 weeks, they're locked at 90 degrees?
Yeah, absolutely. So this won't be an exhaustive list. And I always try and go back to principles here. So the idea is there's a list that comes along with the cross bracing protocol that Tom and his sort of team of physios and colleagues have come up with. And it's a great list, but it's not necessarily exhaustive. So it consists of things like wall squats, heel raise, wall squats, bent knee calf raises, a whole bunch of exercises for the rest of the body. So you can go to town on the other leg. You can do it. It's a great time to start working on your bench press PR, get nice and strong upper body, core, etc. But the idea is you do as much as you can do with your knee fixated at 90 degrees. So it's not a non-weight bearing protocol in that you can put as much weight on it within reason as you can. They don't really encourage you to start increasing and doing like proper resistance training other than body weight. But within those confines, you can be pretty creative. So I get people doing like lots of isometric exercises. You can do an isometric leg press. You can do an isometric split squat. You can do isometric squats. So just get them sort of on a bench and then on a box and just leaning forwards and holding that position there. So heaps and heaps of little exercises, loads of bridge variations, glute banded exercises, Copenhagen planks with your knee at 90 degrees. So working on your adductors, working on your abductors, isometric hamstring curls, isometric glute kickbacks, all that sort of stuff. So you can be creative. And I think that's where as a physiotherapist or an exercise professional, you can really help people out and try and tailor exercises within those constraints to people's preferences.
Yeah, there's a lot that you can do, even though there's that massive constraint there. With the hamstring curls, are you just getting people to sort of like try and flex their knee and the brace is just locked in place, or are you having some sort of external load?
Uh, Both. So,
Okay.
and you can do co-contractions as well. But yeah, you can definitely just get them loaded up on the hamstring curl and yeah, potentially just put it really, really heavy. Just fix it like at a range at that 90 degrees, obviously, and just get them pushing into it as hard as possible. But you can also just get them, say, in a bridge position and just pulling their heel down into the ground, things like that.
Very cool. Hey, physios. I know that we all know how expensive continuing education courses can be. What if you had the chance to learn from some of the brightest minds in the industry from the comfort of your own home, all at the fraction of the cost of those weekend courses? This is where Masterclass by Physio Network comes in. Imagine having front row access to the world's leading experts breaking down complex topics into digestible module-based video courses. It's basically like Netflix for physios, and it gives you the option to learn about a ton of different topics. If you're interested in a particular area, the chances are that Physio Network already has a masterclass on it, or they're working on one right now. Masterclass is your ticket to staying relevant, informed, and delivering the best care possible to your patients. Click the link in the show notes and use the discount code NOAH10 at checkout to get an exclusive 10% off on Masterclass. Don't miss this opportunity to elevate your expertise. If you're still unsure, test it out with a 7-day free trial. You're going to love it. Yeah, it's awesome that there's so much that you can do and that it's encouraged to stay active in this process. And I like that you emphasized that you focus on principles and that sometimes you deviate a little bit from those sheets because again, everybody's different. People have different preferences and people have different starting points, which is the next question that I
Mm.
wanted to ask you. I'm imagining someone who tore their ACL 5 days or 7 days ago. They likely have a lot of pain and a lot of swelling still. And a lot of the exercise that you mentioned are pretty challenging. And of course, they could be regressed. But are you working with anybody where, rest is prioritized a little bit more than exercise in those first few days or weeks?
Yeah, good question. Definitely. I think a lot of people feel, I guess they read things online and they see videos and they think that the exercise, especially in that first 4 weeks, is so important. And if they don't do, 2 hours of it every single day, they start to feel really guilty.
Hmm.
And I think it's really important to clarify. Well, I mean, firstly, the exercise promoting the healing of the ACL is very theoretical. We don't know that we might come. There might be a proper randomized control trial one day that shows that you can rest at least in that first period, and you're not going to necessarily be at any significant detriment. So I think it's important, especially for individuals that have a lot on their plate, and you can just see that they're not coping very well, and perhaps they're not then recovering between their exercise sessions. So one of the
Hmm.
first things I always ask people now after that first week is, do you feel like you're recovering between sessions? And that could be psychologically recovering. That could be signs of physical recovery or not recovering. Are they really sore when they go to do their next session? Because it's just basic strength and conditioning principles. You've got to make sure people recover properly. And our tendency is to get people doing this every single day. But, for someone who's got a low pre-existing history of training, those exercises, doing some, wall sits and stuff to fatigue can make people really sore. So you might
Yeah.
need a good 48 hours between training sessions, if not more.
Right.
So definitely for some people, I don't want the exercises to provide an additional stress beyond the capacity of their system, right? So a little bit of stress obviously is potentially good, but if you feel like it's overall putting a big stress on their system, then theoretically that's not going to be good for their physical, psychological well-being. Is it really going to be promoting their healing? So yeah, it's so individualized. And that's probably one of my biggest takeaways after working with the first sort of cohort of people is especially in that first 4 weeks, the main goal is to keep that knee braced at 90 degrees and make sure that that person is coping as well as they can.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I love that point. And I like that you're asking about recovery, not just from the physical standpoint, but psychologically, because they're in it for the long haul, right? And we know that these major injuries, we zoom in on the ACL or the broken bone or whatever it is that may be getting operated on in the case of a surgery. But we're dealing with human beings, and these are traumatic things that happen to people, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. And I think it's vital that we're checking in on them and seeing how they're coping throughout the whole process. So kudos to you for focusing on that. But I'm not surprised. I mean, I'm chatting you today for a reason, Geoff.
Thanks, Noah.
Of course. So is there anything else in those first 4 weeks that you want to touch on that you feel maybe goes a little bit under the radar? Like the thing that we just spoke about. So anything related to symptoms or other aspects of management, maybe ambulation.
Um, yeah, absolutely. So I'd say that probably the biggest thing to realize is there's support out there, and there's a network of people out there now who have been through. I think it's over 800 people have now been through the cross bracing protocol, and there's a fantastic resource on Facebook, the cross bracing protocol pioneers group. I may not be the exact name, but it's along those lines. And there's a large proportion of the people who have been through this protocol are actually on that group. And anyone obviously doing the protocol can join that group, and it's fantastic because you can reach out and share stories. You can share some of your struggles, and there would be plenty of tips and advice out there. So things, from walkers, from little knee scooters, you can get around on a scooter, which can be really helpful. There's challenges out there. There's people trying to take photos and videos of themselves in on scooters in lots of random situations. So there's little ways to make it fun and enjoyable. So I think that sort of thing is really important because ambulation, like getting around, walking around, moving can be a challenge, especially if it's your driving foot. I was going to say if it's your right
Mm.
foot, it depends what country you're in, obviously. But if it's your driving foot, then and you're an adult who's normally driving around, then straight away you are not driving for quite a period of time. So that can be really, really important, especially if you're in an area where you don't have access to good public transport, then that's a big consideration. But at least if there are other options out there that you can start to get around a bit more comfortably, because spending 8 to 10 weeks on a pair of crutches can be pretty challenging too.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, those support groups are wonderful and they exist for other injuries as well. My little brother's in one right now for his Achilles rupture. I know Kieran Richardson runs a separate conservative ACL Facebook group. So there's a lot of them out there. So I think it's good to be aware of them, whether you're a clinician to recommend to patients or just if you're a patient. Cool. All right, Geoff. So it's week 5. People are now able to move a little bit. And I think it may make sense to talk about it in terms of, week 5, 6, and 7, because from week to week, you're incrementally just gaining a little bit more range of motion. So do you feel like week 5 is very different from 7? Is it really different from week 10? Is there maybe sort of a cutoff point that you want to draw here so that we could sort of talk about this next phase when people are allowed to start moving their knee more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's week 8 that people can start to walk around without crutches. So that's sort of week 5 to 7 is probably the opening phase, but you're still on your crutches. Week 7, you can start weight bearing as tolerated. So that's when you can actually put your foot on the ground and start getting around, but you're still on crutches. So those sort of that 3 week period is probably makes sense to talk about as a group. So over that period, sort of from week 5, you start to open it up from 60 to 90. I'm double checking my notes here, so I don't tell you the wrong thing. 60 to 90. And then by week 7, you're at 30 to 120 degrees. So first couple of weeks, 60 to 90 and then 45 to 90 doesn't move a huge amount, but it's still a huge significant milestone. And I actually find people are quite nervous to move their knee. So after having this belief that it's really bad to move your knee and people are very, very protective,
Hmm.
all of a sudden they can start to move it. And it's normal for it to potentially be a bit stiff and a bit sore as you start to move it. So, in my experience, most people don't have a lot of pain and discomfort after that first period. So, by the end of that 4 weeks, it's actually feeling quite good because you haven't moved it. You've been, apart from your exercises, you've been resting it a lot. And then when you start to move it, it can be a bit scary. It can be a bit painful. So just giving people plenty of reassurance that that's normal. And it's just because you're getting pain doesn't necessarily mean you're causing your knee damage. And it's specifically the pain is not necessarily that you're damaging. Well, it won't be that you're damaging your ACL. It's at that stage, it's actually needed to start to get things moving. And then that transitions into moving within your exercises. So rather than isometric exercises where you're not moving, you now start to move within the available range. So the exercises, by and large, are fairly similar, but rather than them being fixed, you are then going through that range. So whether it's 60 to 90, 45 to 90, and then by week 7, you're going from 30 to 120 degrees. So that really
The big
starts to open
increase.
up your options. Yeah, exactly. So you're doing squats through range, you're doing split squats through range. You can start to add in some more hip hinge variations. So RDLs, deadlifts, those sorts of things. Obviously, you're not going all the way up to lockout, but you still start to work through that available range. So leg press through range, leg curls through range. One thing worth noting here is that currently leg extensions are not encouraged. I think there's quite a historical component to that where
Hmm.
surgeons didn't traditionally prescribe leg extensions. So that's still something that's not in here. And I do stick to that. So in my experience, it's actually not that hard to get people strengthening out their quads after the cross bracing protocol. It's a lot easier than it is post ACL reconstruction, where you're dealing with a lot of pain and swelling and quads inhibition. With this, because pain is usually controlled quite well, there's not necessarily much inhibition happening there. So it's fine to make that up later. I think in the future we'll probably see that we start incorporating leg extensions earlier in the piece, but at the moment we're not, and I don't deviate from that for probably obvious reasons. Because
Yeah.
if someone doesn't get a good result, I don't really want them coming back to me saying this is the reason for my poor result.
Right. Yeah, the whole leg extension thing, it's a big debate. And I feel like if Eric Mera was on our podcast right now, he'd have something to say about advocating for them. And when I'm working with people after ACL surgeries, I'm a pretty big advocate for them. Not, super heavy week 1, definitely not, like
Mm,
waiting until people can tolerate them.
mm,
But I do think they're a great quad strengthening exercise, but it's good to know that you're not dealing with as much of that inhibition in the cross bracing protocol, because that's typically the hurdle, right?
mm.
It's that when you're trying to get people to use their quad post ACL surgery, that they're finding ways to compensate, and they have a hard time sort of accessing or using their quads. Uh,
Yeah.
I'd imagine after being locked in a brace for 4 weeks, though, a lot of things will work very well for a lot of muscle groups from a strengthening standpoint.
Yeah, exactly. And I do think it's really important to emphasize that we're not dealing with as much of that sort of inhibition, um, because and there's plenty of sort of in-depth discussions around this, but some of the reason that we don't have that quad strength post ACL reconstruction is because of that inhibition, and it's probably a litmus test or a sign that your knee is just not ready yet. It's not
Hmm.
healed properly. Whereas because of this protocol, we see a large amount of healing happening by that 12-week mark. People don't usually feel too unhappy loading their quads up. And if you take that long-term perspective here, we've got plenty of time, which we can touch on later, before we can properly return to sport and stuff. We've got plenty of time to get your quads really, really strong down the line. And there are plenty of little options, which is what you just alluded to start to work on your quads now anyway.
Yeah, there's no rush, right?
No rush. Yep.
Yeah. So I'd imagine, I don't know about you, but when I don't move for a while, my joints, they start to make some noises. They start to pop a little bit. And I think that would really happen if my joints were sort of stuck in one position for 4 weeks. And I'd imagine if that's happening with any of your patients, they might have a lot of concern around those noises that, are they tearing their ACL? Are they popping it? Have you had to deal with that with any patients?
Honestly, no and no.
Interesting.
Not really. I've definitely had people concerned about their ACL. So when they start doing exercise and they get pain and feelings, they definitely do go, "Oh, is that my ACL?" So yeah, it's really important to address that. But the clicking, popping stuff, not necessarily. But yeah, it would be a very similar sort of conversation to the ones that we have around when they are concerned that any pain is their ACL. And just reassuring them that it's very safe. You're still, at this stage, you're within a brace. You can only go through a safe range of motion anyway. Everyone else has gone through this process, and helping people understand their pain and their clicking and their sensations, and helping them to understand that they're not necessarily a sign of damage.
Absolutely. Okay, so week 8, you're now able to start walking. And when I spoke to Steph Philbay, she told me that this milestone for people to start walking, it's not necessarily because it was dangerous to do it prior. It's just because it's not really feasible because you don't have the
Yeah,
available range of motion. Is that the case?
yeah, that's the case. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So how much range of motion do they now have at week 8? I'll check my notes too.
They've got it's that 30. So it's sorry, no, it's 20 degrees. It's 20. Yep, 20 to 120. So at that 20 degrees, and this is where I think if you do the modified 30 to 90, you can still potentially get around a little bit. So you can get that foot down there when you've only got 30 degrees. 30 degrees of or 30 degrees short of extension, so 30 degrees of flexion does sound like a lot, but when you actually see someone with their knee bent at 30 degrees, it's not that significant. It's nothing like that 90 degrees. So you can still get that foot down onto the ground. And then by week 8, you have got only 20 degrees of flexion in that knee, all the way back to 120, which is basically as much flexion as you can have in the brace. But yeah, that 20 degrees is enough for them to start to walk around. It's still not a normal gait, obviously,
Hmm.
but they can start to get around, and usually that's a big relief. Like you can start holding a cup of coffee as you walk to your couch, for example.
Yeah, the things that you don't realize that you should be grateful for, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay. And are people weaning off of the crutches pretty typically in your experience? Or sorry, pretty quickly in your experience?
Yes, by and large, I have definitely had someone who didn't. He really struggled and he was a bit younger as well, but he really struggled to get out of his brace. He really struggled to get off crutches.
Hmm.
So that was a big issue. But he did get there in the end. But most people are throwing those things away, to be honest with you, Noah.
Yeah, of course. And that's
They
happening at
just
week 8.
That's happening at week 8. Yes. I'm just double checking my notes.
Gotcha.
But week 8, usually on the full 12 week, you're starting to get rid of those crutches. I mean, I encourage people to sort of take the week to try and wean off them. But honestly, by that stage, if a lot of people have kids and things like that, and they're driving, so they sort of get off them quite quickly. And bearing in mind that the week before that they are weight bearing as tolerated, so they're already getting that foot down. So that's a bit of a weaning process anyway.
Hmm.
So most people do get off the crutches quite quickly and easily.
Yeah, that's great. So is it at this point that people are starting to feel pretty normal? Now, of course, as you mentioned, their gait isn't perfect, right? You need
Mm.
close to full extension to have that gait feeling much, much more normal. So I'd imagine they're still moving around with a limp, but how is their pain typically at this point? How's their confidence?
Yeah, look, I guess it's worth talking a little bit here about the types of people that do go into the protocol. So, most of the time, they don't have a severely injured knee, in that they don't have a lot of other injuries to the knee. So, they haven't usually got big meniscus tears and things like that. And therefore, by this stage, everyone that I've had, pain has not been an issue by this stage. So it's pretty good. So it one of the issues as we start to open up the brace and then the brace actually comes off is actually potentially holding people back and letting them know that their ACL is not strong yet, because they start feeling really good. They're just like, hey, I could go for a run. I could get back to, the things that I love to do. I could go hiking. I could jump on my bike at least. But you've got to actually hold people back. So it's quite different to post ACL reconstruction, where people are still usually a lot of pain, swelling, and you've almost got to encourage them to do more stuff.
Yeah, very big contrast then from week 5 to
Mm.
week 8.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. It's
at
it's
least from
it's
a
an exciting
confidence
time.
standpoint. Yeah, cool.
Mm, mm.
Okay, so what comes after that at this point? From week 9 to 10, they start getting full flexion, right? Um, when do they get their full extension? Is that week 10?
That's week 10. Yep.
Okay.
So basically,
And
the brace is unrestricted by then.
yeah, so then from week 8 to 12, they're moving into this point where they're unrestricted, then their brace is completely not restricting them. When it comes to week 10, now they're strengthening their leg through full range. Are you still shying away from knee extensions typically at this point? Is that something that you introduce like way after the protocol?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I think when Tom now lets people start doing that is about the week 16 mark post injury. So yeah, but the whole time you're in the brace, you're not doing leg extensions basically.
Right. You are allowed to do sort of a quad isometric though, right? Or a knee extension
Correct.
isometric. Okay.
No, strictly
No.
speaking, no.
Okay. Okay. Just co-contractions.
Just co-contractions, absolutely. Yep.
Got it.
So no sort of open chain leg extension.
Okay. Got it. Okay. So then any important things that you want to touch on from week 8 to week 12 in terms of programming, or is it as straightforward that we may think, except for the knee extensions? I'm assuming there's no other contraindications. It's just full range of motion strengthening, getting strong in those new ranges of motion that you have access to, making sure that you're able to spend time in the extension with your muscles and not just passively, and same with flexion, just working on the end ranges.
Yeah, definitely. And look, it's I guess fairly basic strength and conditioning stuff in that you're more at the high rep, low load end of the spectrum. So you're not going to start loading them up heavy and doing heavy deads and squats and stuff in the 4 to 6 reps, something like that. It's normally going with the lighter loads, but still trying to work on some good strengthening and hypertrophy style protocols. So going up to that 1 to 3 reps in reserve if possible, so long as symptoms are fine, and really starting to push people forwards with a view to, if they get a good outcome on their MRI, etc., then actually getting them back to running very soon after you come out of the brace.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's starting to get into strengthening, even some introducing some like plyometric progressions and stuff to get them ready for that. So it's exciting. So first 4 weeks really tough, psychologically demanding. You can't do much, but as that brace opens up, it's like your world opens up and you can start doing way more options in terms of your rehab, and people can really see their path back to doing the things that they love, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
And once again, it's a huge contrast potentially to ACL reconstruction.
Right. That's amazing. I think there's one thing that happens before the return to run, though, and correct me if I'm wrong, but is that a flight to Sydney?
That's a flight to Sydney, mate.
Okay, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. So,
All right.
in terms of successes and failures, would you say most of the people that you've worked with have seen that their ACL is healed after doing the cross bracing protocol?
Yes. So I unfortunately have had one bad outcome, but it was there's a bit of a story to it. But he essentially still got about a 40% heal, so it wasn't necessarily a complete waste of time. but he went into it with eyes wide open and was told that he wasn't really a good candidate, but he was too young for, ideally for surgery.
Mm.
So he wanted to give it a go anyway. But everyone else so far, fortunately, has had a very good outcome. So it's been fantastic because it's a nerve wracking, it's incredibly nerve wracking for the person, and it's nerve wracking for me and for Tom. I know
Yeah.
he won't mind me saying this. He never looks at the scans beforehand. He's almost a bit superstitious about it, and he doesn't. He just literally opens it up in front of them, and he gets very. I've spent a day down there with him. He gets very very nervous when they're coming in, even still after seeing 800 odd people. He
Wow.
really care. He really cares about each person, which is nice.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Wow. Okay. Would you quantify those people that had really good outcomes, or qualify them as sort of having a fully healed ACL? Is that the proper terminology?
Yeah, so they're all categorized in terms of the quality of their heel. And I think it's 0 to 4 is the rating system, where 0 is a fully anatomical ACL. Grade 1 is close to an anatomical heel without going to the sort of details of it. But basically, yeah, everyone gets an initial rating. But the idea is that the ACL will continue to remodel, and that's why the follow up and, pardon me, the return to sport is actually 12 months, and there is a follow up MRI done then just to see the quality of the heel at that stage,
Hmm.
to properly inform people of the quality of their heel. And look, there would be there's arguments for and against that, obviously, because if someone doesn't get a gold medal standard heel or a 0 or a 1, then arguably they are going to receive some nocivic information when they're told that they don't necessarily have a very good heel, and potentially are told that maybe it's not best for them to go back to the sport that they love. So there's those arguments against it, but also um, properly informing people of the quality of their heel. And moving forwards, I think we'll get more information around the importance of that for individuals and their return to sport and their likelihood of re-injury, etc.
Like how the quality of the heel relates to the return to sport success. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I imagine being that individual with the 40% heel, and that must be a tough spot to be in mentally. And just thinking about, what does that mean for your future? Usually, at least in Canada, people don't tend to operate on partially torn ACLs. They tend to recommend physio for that. So
Mm.
I guess the process for that individual is just to continue on, carry on.
Yeah, yeah. Look, it is difficult, and it's difficult managing. And for this person, he was a child, so it's also difficult sort of managing their expectations, their parents' expectations, what they've been told by medical staff, whether they think they need surgery, whether they think they can go back to the sport that they love, those sorts of things. So it is a tricky process, that one,
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely.
Hmm. All right. Wow. So overall, it sounds like after they get out of the brace, the return to sport timelines, it's similar to an ACL reconstruction. It's still that 12 month mark or so, but it also seems like maybe at that 3 month mark overall, as long as they had good success with the bracing protocol, they're in a pretty good spot, a little bit better than they might be 3 months after an ACL surgery.
Yeah, definitely, Noah. I think that's sort of what I try and say to people when they're asking me about the different options out there. And I guess I've communicated this via social media before. We try and, well, Tom and other people running this protocol try and encourage people to wait to 12 months, and that's just because the ligament itself is stronger at that point, and we can see that there seems to be reduced re-injury rates at that stage, but also you can see the differences on the MRI, as that ligament itself remodels, and therefore it's informing the person that if they go back before that they are at increased risk of re-injury. And most people are pretty accepting of that, and they don't want to obviously re-injure that ligament that they now know has healed so well. But in that interim period between, I guess, 3 and 12 months, there is so much that you can go back to doing. It's more just the high risk activities, the cutting, pivoting, skiing, soccer, those sorts of activities that they are encouraged not to return to before, one, the timeline, but two, and arguably more importantly, is all the return to sport testing as well. So that's a really important sort of thing to mention, that they obviously have to pass all their return to sport testing before they're recommended to go back to sport. But in the interim, as I was rambling a bit here, but in the interim, they can do so much. So people are getting back to hiking. I've got a guy who almost very quickly after his 12-week was out rock climbing on the local mountains here. They're doing lots of rewarding activities that I don't anecdotally see people after ACL reconstruction doing much sooner.
Hmm.
And they're not dealing with any of the side effects in terms of getting significant pain and swelling and those sorts of things. And it's usually, as I said before, it's more of a case of trying to hold people back and encourage them to not do anything too risky, up until that point where we know, based off healing timeframes and obviously the visualization of that MRI, that they have got like a nice strong taut ligament there.
Awesome. Geoff, I have one more question about sort of that 12-week mark, if that's all right.
Go for it, man.
Are people typically atrophied at that point? Are you noticing that there's a lot of muscle mass and strength differences from limb to limb?
Yeah, they definitely are, but definitely not to the same extent. So typically after an ACL reconstruction, you'll take like a circumference measurement of their quads, and you could just see it's kind of wasted away, and it hasn't, not necessarily at the 12-week mark, but at least initially after surgery, you will see it's just the muscle has just been inhibited. It just looks like this soggy sort of poor excuse for a quad muscle. Whereas, whereas at once you come out of that brace at the 4-week mark, you've been working like wall sits can be a pretty challenging. They're a terrible exercise. I hate wall sits, but they can be a pretty challenging exercise. And people, like, I've had people try and gamify it a little bit and try and beat their record. I think there's a bit of a PR thing going on the Pioneer group for people trying to get the longest ever wall sit holds and things like that. So you
Awesome.
can challenge your quads and you can work them really hard. So if you get into that brace, say a week after injury, and you're doing wall sits, obviously symptom permitting, and maintaining, activating those quads, working them to fatigue, you're not really going to lose much. So it's nothing like the same as what you'd normally see. Yes, there are some differences, and there's some differences in strength through the whole range of motion. I think is probably what I see, especially once you start introducing leg extensions, because they haven't really done that yet.
Hmm. Okay. Got it. Beautiful. I think that's an amazing summary, and I think that would be very, very helpful for people. I know it's helpful for me when it comes to the time where I'm doing the cross bracing protocol for the first time. So, Geoff, I really, really appreciate it. Is there anything else that you want to add before we wrap up here?
No, I don't think so. Oh, yes, there is. I think initially, I guess emphasizing that you if you suspect you've got an ACL injury, push, no matter where you are, to try and get an MRI as soon as you can, because time is of the essence. Don't let anyone forcibly straighten your knee. I've had so many people come and see me and go, I was keeping my knee bent because I read about this online, but then I went to see my local physio and he's forced my knee into extension. I felt like this tearing feeling. It's just, yeah, it's not good. Don't let someone forcibly straighten your knee. Make sure you try and reach out and find someone who's at least aware of your other non-surgical options. And there is the cross-bracing protocol. There are other bracing protocols, even one within the cross-bracing protocol, but even outside of it, there's other bracing options out there. There's non-bracing options. You can crack straight into rehab potentially. So I'm super passionate about people being informed about their decisions and making the best decision for the short-term and long-term health of their knee and their whole system. So I think try and get the best information you can as soon as you can, because time is ticking, time's of the essence. And if you decide you want to do the cross bracing protocol, you're best off being in there 1 week post injury. So yeah, I think that's probably worth emphasizing, mate.
Awesome. Okay. Geoff, where can people learn more about you and sort of the services that you offer and the resources that you put out there?
Best place to find me is on Instagram, bestrong.physio. I put a lot of content out on there. You can also probably find me on LinkedIn. I do pop up on TikTok, but I'm pretty regular on there. My website is www.bestrong.physio, and you can feel free to, if you've got any questions, email me. I really enjoy when people email me and ask me questions and say maybe they're struggling with things. Have you got any tips? So yeah, if I can help, I definitely will try.
Awesome. And I'll link all of that to the show notes as well. All right. Geoff, thank you so much. It was nice to finally chat to you after about 2 years or so of knowing each other. And thank you for providing all of this wonderful, wonderful material and knowledge to everybody listening. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for having me, Noah. I really appreciate it.
Thank you once again for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed it, please consider leaving a review. If you would like to follow me on social media, you can follow me at noahmandel.physio on Instagram and TikTok. Have a wonderful day, and remember to keep moving forward.